All right, let's now talk about the edge and contra the defensive tackle group. If there are only two spots for this position on the field at a time, they've got 10 guys as opposed to the 8 that they have at defensive tackle. Now, some of these guys are can play multiple positions. I'm including Zach Bond here because he can do it
Oh,
in a pinch, even if he's going to be a starting linebacker. But you've obviously got, if we take a look at the depth chart, you've got Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff at the top. Brandon Graham and Nolan Smith. That's a reasonable top 4 with Jalix Hunt if he can earn his way onto the field as a rookie. Mixing in, we mentioned Zach Bond. This is a role that he has played in the past. And then beyond those guys, a couple long shots with some draft pedigree in Terrell Lewis. He can run. Julian Okwara, and then some holdovers from years past, Teron Jackson and Patrick Johnson. How do you feel about that group overall? What are the big questions for you heading into camp?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many questions here, right? We won't go player by player questions here because we'll kind of get to that. But I suppose it's all included. It's if Bryce Huff can be a top guy, right? I mean, Bryce Huff's been a situational pass rusher before. The Eagles are paying him to be the top pass rusher on the team. It's if Josh Sweat can be the player he was for the 17-game sample from the middle of 2022 to the middle of 2023 and not what he was when we last saw him. And then the other big question here is if Nolan Smith is a player, right? And I think that's a huge variable. If Nolan Smith does not take a jump this year, then there's reasons to be underwhelmed by this group of edge rushers. But if Nolan Smith takes a jump this year, then really it changes the complexion of the group. So I think, look, Josh Sweat, the Eagles need him to be better than he was at the end of last year. I do think when you look at Sweat's last 4 seasons, right, there is a floor there. 2020, 6 sacks, 2021, 7.5 sacks, 2022, 11 sacks, 2023, 6.5 sacks. Like, I don't think, now you could have said that at one point about Derek Barnett too, and then the bottom fell out from underneath him. But I don't like
it goes up by half seasons, then all of a sudden it would paint a different picture. But
yeah, but I think like you can Sweat's going to be he's a starting level edge rusher. The Eagles need to be more, but he's a starting level edge rusher. The big question here is, can Bryce Huff be a star, and can Nolan Smith be can he turn those athletic traits into like legitimate production?
Yeah, I think you said it well. I think the biggest question here, the thing that changes their ceiling the most, is not Bryce Huff. It is Nolan Smith. Like Bryce Huff, they're paying and hoping that he can do what he has done in a larger sample, but he's going to be able to, he's going to be an NFL caliber player. He's going to be a good player on the field, at least in rushing the passer, right? Yep. We don't know that yet about Nolan Smith. And if Nolan Smith can look like a guy who was a borderline first, second round pick in his second year, then yeah, like all of a sudden this group has a little bit of juice, and there is a sum of the parts about the pass rush that is, he doesn't have to be Hassan Reddick, but if everybody is holding their own a little bit, he changes that ceiling. It's one of the more interesting Vic Fangio questions is, how does he plan to use Nolan Smith? And I'm excited to learn how that looks, what that's going to look like, how we find it out.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think that answer comes during training camp with Nolan Smith, because I thought he looked good last
year. Yeah,
exactly. I think that's more of like when the pads are on, right? Because there is a physical element to this. We all know Nolan Smith. We all know his athleticism, and we all know he can get around an edge. But can he do it consistently? Can he finish at the quarterback? This was a big question coming out of college too, right? He did not have prolific production in college, and one of the things, I talked about, well, the defense he was in, and you talked about the advanced numbers. But ultimately, like if you weren't a prolific sack guy in college, and then you come in your rookie year and you don't really make much of an impact in terms of affecting the quarterback, then at this, you need to see him affect the quarterback. It's not just the tantalizing tools. So we are in agreement that he's really the wild card here, because he hasn't done it. The Eagles are expecting him to do it. Like, he is the third guy, and I mean Brandon Graham is here, and important guy in the locker room and is going to play some snaps. But Nolan Smith needs to be the third guy for the Eagles, and frankly, he should. Like if the Eagles had their way, I think they would want him to kind of push for some of Josh Sweat's snaps as the season progresses as well.
Yeah, I think in a perfect world, you have Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff sort of rotating as the designated pass rusher, if you will, and then you have Nolan Smith playing more of a full-time role as a guy who can cover or rush the passer, and then you're playing those odd man fronts, and then all of a sudden you're a little bit more unpredictable. But that's a lot on Nolan Smith and a role that he has not earned yet. So we will see how that goes.
We all silly like the mayor.